Hey folks, welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be focusing on this part of the Level Up series on the Scrum and Lineout. So obviously we've brought you through all the position specific stuff, and now we're going to look at more unit skills and what you should be noticing and wondering in the upcoming matches that you're going to get the opportunity to watch. We're going to get straight into it. What we're going to do is we're going to go to David Wilkinson, so the IRFU National Referee Development Manager, and we're just going to go and ask him a couple of questions around the Scrum and Lineout. David, how's things?
Good, Colin. Yourself? Keeping well? Everybody's all good?
Splendid.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, look, thanks a million for coming on. Look, as I say, we'll get straight to it. So, if we're talking about the Scrum and Lineout, what are the key areas that, you as a referee would look at relative to those two units?
I think the first and foremost, Colin, the most important in terms of both units, Scrum and Lineout, for a referee point of view. I know it sounds pretty boring, but it's back to basics and it's safety, particularly around the Scrum where we've got engagement and head-on-head, etc., going into tight situations like that. And then obviously from the Lineout point of view, safety sort of where players are lifted by teammates for the jumper being put up there, the non-throwing in team being put up there, contact in the air. And I suppose really important from our point of view that if a player is put up in the air, that the supporters bring that jumper back to ground safely. So I know it sounds pretty boring, but safety is our number one priority.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think you've touched on a couple of key points there, and especially in that lineout lifting and that we talk about lineout lifters. We don't often talk about lineout bringer downers. So that's a key part of the job as well, and how we can be safe within that. If you want to just go in a wee bit further into the actual scrummaging side of things, what are some of the good pictures that I suppose people can paint for when they're actually going into a scrum?
Well, Colin, if you're happy enough, I'll just throw up a clip here, which actually sort of shows pretty good line-out setup, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So listen, I'll just play this through. This was from an A Interpro a couple of weeks ago, and the referee does pretty good here in terms of the setup. So first and foremost, I suppose we mentioned the safety, but the setup for the referee is absolutely key, making sure everyone's in the right position. So straight away, he obviously checks that the back lines are actually back five first before we even get into the participants in the scrum. Then he obviously checks into them in the front rows and makes sure that the back rows, so the number 8s, are in position and everyone's second rows are all bound in. And I know you guys have looked at that. And then your front rows are tight. Once he's got obviously the setup right, then obviously we would get into what he would call the engagement process, the crouch bind set. So Peter will call, once he's happy, he calls crouch. For us as referees, then the big word in terms of re-emphasizing that safety aspect, Colin, is stability. So we need both packs to be in a crouched position and steady, stable, a nice stable platform before the referee should be going on to the next phase, which is obviously the bind stage. Same principles apply here then when we get into the bind stage. You can see the players sort of lock in. Now I appreciate the scrum halves are in the way here, but you can see the far side here, obviously the binds are up and the heads are all interlocking across the front row. So they're not too far apart, but they're not too close as well. And then again, once the referee's happy that they're steady, in they come, and we get an engagement. So this is the sort of picture we're looking for, where we've got nice big arms up, as we would say, bind up. And if you look at this sort of the Leinster loose head, the left-handed guy of the scrum here, the number 1, his back is sort of perfectly straight. So our sort of, to get that safety aspect, we would really focus on the engagement process, making sure that there's stability at each stage going throughout the process. And then once they're in, it becomes then what we would term binds and body angles. So ensuring that the front rows are all bind up, sort of not on the arm, good high binds up on the body, and that we've got stability there throughout. In terms of the angles of the front row, to keep it as really simple as we possibly can, we basically want the players to push straight. So we want the backs parallel to the touchline and sort of not driving in on an angle. And you can see we get a really good pushing contest here. So we've got a good arm up here, good bind up. Again, another good bind up, sort of long up on the back. And we've got 2 props in a really good straight position. So that's effectively what we're looking for. So to get that safety aspect, I suppose to recap, it just sort of comes down to stability through the engagement process, getting the binds up and the body angles straight. And I suppose just to sort of add into the straight, not only straight in terms of pushing up and down, straight up and down the pitch, but also straight as in not tipping their head and shoulders below the hips. So we don't have this player's back coming down at an angle like this. We need it nice and straight like that. that's pretty much it, I suppose, in terms of keeping it nice and simple. That's basically what we would be looking for.
Brilliant. No, look, I really appreciate that, David, and look, some great keywords and key factors there. Like, you know, you're talking about that engagement and the stability on it. Then your binds and body angles coming from there, and you know, absolutely brilliant. I suppose takeaways for people to come from that. Thanks a million for that, David. We'll come back to you later on with a couple of questions, and we'll keep on the flow here. So, look, I'm delighted to introduce Peter Smyth, the head of elite player development with the IRFU. He's, you know, a varied history within Irish rugby and taking up a number of roles there through Leinster and the club game as well. Peter, thanks a million for joining us today.
Thanks, Colin. Good to be here, and hello to everyone.
Look, thanks a million for coming along. Look, I won't hold you up any longer. You're going to give us a bit of a presentation on Scrum and Lineout and a couple of things we could be noticing and wondering within that.
Okay, so again, thanks a lot for having me. And I've obviously just looked at some of the Autumn Nations Cups footage, particularly around the Lineout and Scrum. So first thing when you're looking at Lineout, obviously there's a lot involved in a Lineout. You've got 8 forwards, generally 8 movement pieces, and then a halfback. So the first thing described in this line is the fact that the 9 is there more than likely means that the Irish team are going to try and deliver ball off the top. So as you're all aware, you're going to have the call, you're going to have to throw, the jump and the lift. And as I take you through this on each stage, so the first thing I'm looking at is, are we getting full extension? Is the throw a good height, which is all there? Delivery of the ball off the top, and then making the point then again, it's an 8-man exercise every line out. So while the lifters and the jumpers were involved in obviously gaining possession, we have the 4 other forwards making sure they're in the correct position that none of the Welsh players can run through and affect the pass from 9 to 10. On the next one, we see a short variation. Again, we have a 9 and a halfback, which would indicate to us that the ball is going to come off the top. Quick movement, delivery of the ball. Again, good full extension of the lifters. Throw at a nice height for the jumper to release. Ball off the top and into the middle of the pitch we play. This one, firstly, you'll notice straight away, we don't have a 9 at halfback. We have a 7 at a halfback. That's the Georgian 5-meter line. So once generally you're watching any games and you see a 7 and a halfback, generally the majority of the time, the 7 will go in and drive and go for the maul. Sometimes it'll be a dummy maul and he'll step out. On these examples I have for you, he'll go in and drive straight away, looking for the try. Slight movement in the Irish lineout. Into that really good space in between the Georgian defenders. Good lifts again from our number 8 and from our second row. Jumper wins the ball, top of the jump. Brings it down straight away. And this is the key person to look in this. So we want to get the momentum moving forward the whole time. The Ian Henderson, the number 4 jersey, is the key person. And as you keep watching him, as this maul unfolds, you'll see how he works the whole time to stay in there and to keep the maul on the right side moving forward. And because he stays in there and he stays fighting for that position, it eventually opens up the short side and Rob Herring scores the try off it. Here's another example here. Again, we've got the 7 and a halfback, which would indicate to us more than likely it's going to be a drive when you're watching these games. Notice this as well. So the Georgians have moved late. Once they've moved late, it's a trigger for the Irish team that if they had a call in a certain spot, they might have to change this call. But what they're trying to do is effectively get the ball into a clear space now. Perfect. They get in between the 2 Georgian jumpers. Again, the lift is good, the throw is good, the jump is good. Ball down, get the maul moving forward quickly. And you can notice how the guys at the front work hard to keep the maul moving forward. Then the last one to notice on our lineouts is the fact now we don't have anyone in that halfback position. We have 9 right at the front of the lineout offering an option. Again, once you see anything out of the ordinary, whether it's a 9 in that position, a 7 in the position somewhere else, it means something generally out of the ordinary has happened on the play. So there's a quick movement. We get a good call. We get a good jump. We get a good lift. 9 comes around and ball is delivered off the top. So they're just examples of some lineouts maybe you'll see over the Six Nations, variations, why people are manipulating space, why people get into certain slots and drive, and then depending on where certain people are positioned, that indicates generally where the ball is going to be driven or whether it's going to be off the top. Just moving forward then onto the scrums. As you can see there, that's the 10-metre line from the recent Ireland-England game. One thing you'll notice there when you're looking at this scrum is straight away there's a tilt to the left-hand side. And in particular, the Irish loose head and hooker joints are very, very tight. So straight away, that should indicate if there's a tilt to the left-hand side and Ireland trying to go up the left-hand side, generally that indicates they're coming back down the short side. So as we let it play through, we have a quick channel 1 ball, straight away, bang, trying to release the winger down the short side. So on that clip, the manipulation of how we set up the scrum, do we set up slightly to the left, slightly to the right, or do we keep it square, is a great indication when you're watching matches generally where the players want to get the ball to and what space they want to attack. On the next one, building on some of just the clips that David Wilkinson was saying earlier, again, we're looking at certain binds, body shapes. Initially, this scrum, there's a fair bit of foot movement and it isn't overly stable. As the ball is delivered back, straight away you can see the Irish number 1 adopting a reasonably straight, powerful position, which forces the Georgian tight head to come up and puts him under a certain amount of pressure. Now the ball comes out, so it's played on, but in other cases that scrum would be reset or potentially it could be a penalty to Ireland. As we go through this one, against Scotland, it's slightly different than the ones we've seen before. The Irish scrum, instead of having it up to the left or up to the right, really concentrates on putting all their strength and power through the middle of the scrum. As they hit, they sink down, keeping all their feet in the ground to make sure there's enough pressure, enough weight on that the Scots can't push them back. The ball is struck, the Scots have a little nudge forward, but the Irish hold it stable, and it's in a really good position then to pass it out to the backs and then to relieve pressure. So they're just some of the examples. They're just some of the examples I've come across and I wanted to share with you guys today.
Brilliant. Thanks a million for that, Peter. And look, a huge amount of insight and knowledge there from both Scrum and Lineout. And I think that we often forget, we try and overcomplicate things, but a really good opportunity for people to go and learn a little bit more and check out things as they're actually going to be watching matches this weekend. So one of the key ones for me, from a Lineout, is it's an 8-man exercise. It's everyone has a role within that, and it's important for it that even if they're not the primary in the primary jumper or lifter position, that they have a role, they have a purpose for being in there. Look, thanks a million for that, Peter. We'll, as I say, we'll come back to you later on for probably a couple of questions, and we'll throw them your way. Time to bring in Colin Mcentee. So Colin, in his current role, is the Director of Rugby Development with Irish Rugby, and has held a number of roles across the IRFU and again Leinster through the academies and through the domestic game as well. So a varied CV there, Colin, and a good understanding, I suppose, of what we're going to be looking for at all levels.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Colin. Yeah, it's it's I suppose just to get into it and to maybe to kick off, if that's what you want, and with a few points, I suppose. I suppose this is sort of, it brings all the the positional seminars together in relation to the unit and the set piece, and it's a primary source of possession. And I suppose the key things to look at is in this, and to understand it's the outcome is a collective effort, be it in a scrum or a line out. So it's absolutely critical that you know your role. And I would suggest when you're watching rugby is be very curious in relation to the position that you play, how that player is performing, and be curious of what they do, because no two players are the same, and they all have different sort of strengths and maybe different sort of techniques to achieve the same outcome. So if we look at it, for me, from my point of view, and I'm just looking at it through a coach's eye, for example, and it might influence some of the players, is, we start with the line out. You got to know your role in the first thing. It's absolutely critical, because firstly, you can either be a lifter, you can be a jumper, you can be a support player. And it's absolutely, it is critical that when you look at various positions, they'll adapt different roles at each stage. So when you're watching rugby, you gotta look at where's the setup. So we look at formation in a line-out, in attack or defence. Peter showed some excellent clips there in the Georgian setup where the Georgians are showing different pictures, and that poses some challenges for the Irish team. So the Irish team have to problem solve, and that's what you should be noticing. Noticing what are the opposition doing, because they're trying to second guess a little bit. It's like a game of chess. They're trying to second guess the Irish team, but it's up to the Irish team to problem solve live. And I know we've heard an awful lot about analysis pre-game. What do the opposition do? What tells do they show? That accumulates into how do we be effective then and translate that in match day. So when you're watching, you got to watch, if you're watching from an attack point of view, where's the space and how are they set up? And as Peter said, if space is taken away, can they problem solve and attack where the space is? So it's really, I think it's really critical that you understand the various roles, because they're interchanged. So I'd say from the outset, from a line out, look at setups, look at where is the space, and look at where is the threat. So you're looking at both sides of the ball. You're looking at then how to win the ball. Is it through movement or is it through speed? And some of the level up webinars already have covered that. But when you put it in the collective, it's the 7 guys in the lineup plus the hooker who'll deliver that. The other thing you'll notice is that there's routines on players in lineouts. So if I walk into a lineout, I should present the same way every time. So I'm not telling the opposition where am I going to lift or whether I'm going to jump. So there's no tells, and that's really important. It's really important from an attack and a defense point of view. And even from a defense point of view, notice maybe late change-ups, and notice why they do that, because they're doing it to try and second guess. But these are all the things you can learn as a player, and then learn the key functional role of each player. Learn the routine of a hooker. He has a set routine. He has a set stance. He has control, and he's in a really calm state. And also the confidence of the players, be it the line-out jumper or the support players. And there, as Peter and David alluded to, is the technique which leads to really good safety. And then what happens next if it's off the top? Are you holding the space and holding the line? And if it's a maul, what's the body positions like? And is it spine and line? So there are some of the things around the line out you should notice. And then for me on scrums, I think you should be very curious when you look at scrums, because there's a lot of different cultures out there when you look at because there's a lot of different scrum coaches, so they all have their own sort of uniqueness. So you got to look at the routines and look at yourself in your position, and you're watching what are the setups like. So what is the height like? What does the bind and the connections look like? Does it, as David said, and Peter, does it lead to balance? Where's the foot placements? Is all the feet on the ground? What sort of body shape do you notice? And if you notice a poor one, are you poor connections and binds? What is the result and what is the effect on that? Is there stability? And is there stability through pressure or through load? And is there transfer of power? And the other thing is when it is engaged, what is the stickability like? So how can the players maintain that as 8 and hold, or is there fractures? And notice why did them fractures occur? So that's where the playback function is really, really good. And the other thing which I think you should find fascinating is notice, is there any changes between scrum to scrum? Because they will try and fix, because a lot of it is true feel. So if you notice on Sunday, for example, if Ireland are struggling in one scrum and you notice the routines and the setups, notice is there a change in the second one to achieve a better outcome? And I think you should be really, really curious. And the fascinating thing about all this series is the answers are in the game, but it's how you look at the game will either give you the answers or won't give you the answers. So that's my tuppence worth, Col.
No, brilliant, Colin. And again, I could sit and listen to their presenters kind of talk all day about this stuff. It really is truly fascinating, the insights that we're getting. I suppose some of the things within that is touching on that, primary sources of possession and how important they are. You would have touched on a couple of things about the outcome being a collective effort, and Peter touched on it as well. And it actually goes back to something that we spoke about in our backline attack and defence webinar yesterday, where what is the outcome we want to achieve, and we need to all actually be working towards that same goal. You've got your routines and tells, and I think that's really interesting. That if you do watch back and if you do pay attention, you will notice that certain hookers may be set up differently if they're going to be going for a longer throw. Certain people standing a different way in those positions in the lineouts. And look, I know you were speaking about Scrum there and about changing setups if it's not working or if you're having difficulty. I think there was a great example a couple of weeks ago with Munster, where that first Scrum, the young Munster prop was absolutely blown out of it, and then went back to absolutely dominate the more experienced player that he was against. And again, that's not just a one-on-one contest. That's 8-on-8 with the one-on-one at the kind of coalface. Look, thanks a million for all those insights, folks. What we're actually going to do now is we'll jump straight into a couple of questions for each of our presenters. And I think for the first one, we'll go to David again. We've a couple of questions around law coming in there. So I suppose, one of the ones is what's the law regarding the loose head props, knees on the ground, and how can we actually, I suppose, watch and make sure that they're being legal at scrum time?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Firstly, obviously, the knee on the ground is illegal, so it is not allowed. Obviously, the players need to be on their feet, so the loose head needs to come up. Again, I suppose then the question goes to, why is the knee on the ground? Is the knee on the ground because he is trying to be illegal or he's being dominated illegally? So the referee, a bit like the guys were saying there in terms of players problem solving live, referees have to problem solve live as well. So then the referee then tries to detect, okay, well, why is the knee in the ground? Is that player being illegal, or is the tight head from the opposition dominating him illegally? And then the referee would have to sort of dissect that and then obviously make a judgment on it. Ideally, firstly, by speaking to both players, telling them exactly what he wants. In terms of the tight head, you must stay up, don't drive in, don't drive down, don't drive in at an angle, keep your bind up, etc. And the loose head, keep tight to your hooker. I think Peter showed a really good clip where the Irish loose head was very tight to the Irish hooker. So he's obviously got to dissect it and sort of problem solve. But no, a knee on the ground is not legal.
Brilliant. And look, some fascinating insights then of the general loose head prop play and why some things may happen. I suppose if we go to Peter next, and it's something you showed us in some of the scrum pictures you had, which was, I suppose, how the flankers were actually set up slightly differently depending on what the outcome was hoped for. So you had in the Scottish clip where everyone was angling in and making sure it was a good solid base, and then we had slightly other ones where it was more to go and get onto that next phase. If you want to just go and maybe give us an insight into why they would do one as opposed to the other.
Yeah, well, just like a couple of clips I showed you there, it depends where teams generally want to go. Generally, in a midfield scrum situation, just like the Scottish one was in our own 22, most backs will want the scrum to be dead straight to give them an option to go to the left or to the right. Generally, if that tilts either side, it's gonna cut off one of your attacking options. So these little kind of chinks you'll look for in a scrum, they're only very slight. So when you're watching games over the weekend for the following few weeks, you're not going to see this dramatic roll to the left or roll to the right, because every referee will just blow his whistle and reset it. It's just about managing it so you can just get that little half second either for a back row move, for the speed of pass to a 10, for a clearance kick, or whatever it is. But generally those midfield scrums, you'll see a lot of the pack, they'll slightly angle in and try and keep all the power of that scrum pushing straight through the opposition rather than let it tilt to the left or to the right.
Brilliant, yeah. And look, and again, it hits on a number of points we've spoken about today and has spoken about over the last couple of things, is what is the outcome, and again, for the backs to have a platform to attack where they want to, they need to make sure that primary source is functioning. No, and an excellent insight there. And I think it goes back to something that Colin was saying as well about that playback function. You know, we're all fans. We all want to watch the game. We all want to enjoy it. And we all want to cheer on, hopefully a great performance. But, you know, if we're going to watch it as fans, we watch it as fans. And I know Kieran Hurley asked this, spoke about it. You know, take the opportunity then to watch it again, or to watch certain segments again, or just make a note of when, you know, something that, you know, you didn't quite understand happened within the game, and go back to that at some stage and give yourself a chance. If we go on to Collie next, look, I suppose we've had a number of questions in about mauls and maul setups. You know, obviously a major part of lineouts and how we actually do this. You know, you spoke about spine and line. So could you just go in and maybe just explain that term, and then maybe just talk about, you know, corrections and binds within a maul, and what would be a strong setup in your opinion?
Yeah, there's no two parts. I'll take the second part first, Carl, because it'll lead into the first question. The first one in relation to, you know, post receiving the ball. Peter showed a really good clip of, you know, full extension. You should really look for full extension in terms of really good technique, straight back, head up. But what you're looking for is your two lifters should be nearly touching each other, because then you're not putting load on your back and getting injured. So you need to profile your players as well to see, you know, they need to feel and get used of, you know, where do I bind here relative to the guy behind me? Because the optimum height is going to be from the back jumper, not the front jumper. The front jumper is going to support. So if you have a taller front jumper and a smaller lifter and a smaller back lifter, it's going to, you might find that the front lifter is actually struggling in the first instance, and he's not struggling because he can't do it. He's struggling because he can't get a full extension. So post then the lift, when they're coming down, that transition in relation to connecting, and you'll hear a phrase of a strong front wall needs to be established, supporting the jumper. So what you're looking for is not when the player is caught, the ball is coming down from the line out. That transition from the support player to get into it very strong and connect to that jumper is really, really important. If he leaves a gap or space, that's an opportunity for the defense, once the jumper hits the ground, to own that space, and you're more or less, your maul is over. So that transition has to be really, really quick, and it has to be repped. You're not just going to go into a game and be able to do it. So I would notice on Sunday or Saturday through the Six Nations footage that will be afforded to us. Notice the routines of the lifters post catching the ball, and how they transition and they connect to that jumper. But also notice how the opposition try to manipulate that, because as I said, if you leave any space and your height is wrong, you're going to get completely exposed. So you need to get that strong front wall. Peter, you showed a great footage of Ian Henderson, and I think you could see Ian working really, really hard, because at times when you go in then to develop the maul, the spine and line is absolutely critical, because you might notice some players will start turning in, and you'll see their backs maybe slant. So what I'm saying with spine and line is, that it's really important that as say a maul turns, that you square up. So the players that are even on the front, they're squaring up, staying connected. So all the power is going straight, because what you don't want to see is power going here, power going there, and that means the maul is going to be very static. What you want to do, and your vision is to see, can I get as many spinal lines parallel to the touch line going in that same direction? And if the heat comes on at the side, can we sort of rotate out and keeping our spine in line? You'll notice an awful lot of that with maul setups, and I think they're really, really good advice for any player, from an age grade player right up to a senior player, just to keep an eye on that, because there's so much good information there that would really help your game in that setup.
Brilliant. No, look, a really detailed answer there, and loads of good stuff within it. And you're talking about that transition from the actual catch and getting the ball back, and I think that's key. Like that spine and line of everyone pushing the one way, everyone getting that drive on, everyone having the same outcome goal. Look, if we talk about, I'll stay with yourself, Colin. If we talk about lineouts, and again, subjective opinion for yourself here, but when might someone close in on a defensive line out, when might they compete, and when might they stay down to go and defend?
It's a good question, but there's two aspects to it. One is how good is the line out that you're actually defending, and what are they showing you? And depending on various levels, some players actually give a lot of tells. What I mean by that, even a lifter or a jumper, they mightn't know it, but subconsciously they could be actually telling you where the ball is. And as maybe a defender, are you noticing that? And the other thing then is, I'm sure with all teams at the moment, they'll have sort of line out defenses. So they're not going to be able to defend the full lineout, and that's the beauty about lineouts, because it is like a game of chess. You'll be manipulating, or you'll be bringing defenses here to attack there, and that's why you'll see movement. But where does the defense then position? Are they square on? And if they're square on, and we've seen this as well, speed will probably beat them. Are they behind? They're allowing that front jumper always get a nod, or are they slightly in front? And for me, it would be slightly in front. And then secondly, I would say, so first is analysing the strength of your opposition. If they have a really good, well-drilled line-out with really good speed, you got to pick your moments to defend. And close to your line, getting 2 pods up or mightn't be the right thing. You might just say, listen, we need to get everyone on the ground here, because there's a really good chance they're going to win it. So going into a game, all teams should have a system, but let me tell you, the system will change, because teams will change from week to week. So unless your team has the ability to be able to make decisions in real time relative to the level you're playing at, there might be small adjustments. I think we as coaches should be giving the players the solution and let them make the decisions on it, and they get a feel themselves. Like, you'll feel even on Saturday that if the Irish lineout, they're feeling confident and they're feeling like they can get at the Wales, you'll see them competing. If they're very concerned that Wales lineout is really good and their maul is really good, you might find that they'll stay down a bit more. So it's relative, and it might be relative to where you are in the pitch as well. So there's no straight answer, Col, but what I would do is I'd keep all your options open. And don't go in with a preconceived idea or system, because the opposition might show you something different that you could exploit.
Yeah, no, look, and again, everything subjective within that. I think I've learned a thing or two here, that you're a man that knows a lot about tells, so I will never be playing poker against you. But I suppose within that, some of the good stuff is that adaptability and us being agile, and our players on the pitch. And if you're a player, it's the pictures that are presented to you, and if that picture changes, how do you adapt? And that could be front row, that could be the back three position, and you know, I think that's one of the key interesting parts of the game is how can we go and adapt, because all teams have game plans, all teams have strategies, but it's what comes when you go on the pitch, because a coach doesn't go on the pitch with you. Look, we just slightly over our time there, so we're going to just wrap it up with 2 more questions, but you know, if you need to log off, feel free. We're going to circulate the recording afterwards. What we'll do is I'm going to come to David for this next question, and then we'll finish off with one for Peter then. So David, there's one coming here from Simon and Connemara. You know, at scrum times we sometimes get penalised for standing up, but that's not actually an infringement. So what in fact are we being penalised for?
Yeah, very good point. Actually, referees say all the time that we're actually penalising them for standing up, but in actual fact, we're actually penalising them when they stand up. By a virtue of standing up, the prop is actually breaking his bind. So we're actually penalising the prop that stands up for breaking his or her bind when they stand up. So it's breaking your bind is effectively breaking what the law is being penalised for.
Brilliant. No, look, perfect, succinct, nailed it. And look, we'll finish off today with a question to Peter. So, you know, in recent times, scrummaging has changed and consistently evolves. If we look at that hooker position, you know, there's a lot of queries coming in around, you know, should you be striking? Should you be just trying to get that 8 shove on? And again, is there certain times maybe that we would do one ahead of the other? Obviously, again, quite subjective question.
Yeah, look, I think for any hookers or anyone who's playing in that position on that call, learn how to strike, because the game will constantly change and evolve from striking to possibly not striking. So I would say learn how to strike. Once the scrum got depowered, as in the packs weren't far apart and there wasn't a big hit, striking became much more back into vogue, because when there was a big hit, people used to charge as quickly as they could across the midline of the scrum and drive over the ball. Since the scrum has been depowered, the art of striking has come back into it. And just quickly referencing back to that clip against England as well, having the ability to strike and place the ball at channel 1 or channel 2, so to the left-hand side of the lock's legs or straight through his legs, is a key skill. So for any hookers out there, you know, don't think it's all about power and just pushing over the ball. You know, now that the scrum is in the position it is, without any law change, you'll need to be able to strike the ball and then to strike it and be able to put it in a few different positions.
Brilliant. No, look, really appreciate it. And as you say, rugby and scrummaging is constantly evolving. And you know, you would have seen changes that some of our provincial teams, even in setups in the last year, to go and counteract that. Folks, thank you very much to all of our presenters, to Peter, to David, and to Colin. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. The last little bit of info I'm going to try it is our Ignite session start on Saturday, so you can still register and sign up for that. We have one final level up webinar in this set of the series. There will be more later on in the season, but our final webinar on that is based on our core skills. So we're going to look at some of the things you can notice and how you can wonder and how you can develop those core skills within this time, and you know, to provide you the opportunity to go back on pitches now before the end of the season in the best possible manner. Thank you very much from myself and from all the backhouse staff, from Orla, David and Janine as well. You know, thanks a million for tuning in.